It is with genuine sadness and sympathy that I share with you today's guest, MJ Rose, has passed since the recording of this episode of Connected Conversations for Creatives. Through it, her wisdom and passion live on, and I hope today's episode honors her memory and is a tribute to her legacy. Hi, and welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Have you ever wondered what makes a story stand out in a crowded marketplace, or how a book can capture not just the minds but also the hearts of readers worldwide? Today we're diving into the art and science of book marketing, an essential aspect that's often the determinant of a book's success. So imagine you've poured your heart and soul into writing a novel. It's a labor of love, a piece of art, but in today's digital age, with thousands of books published daily, how do you ensure that your book doesn't get lost in the noise? How do you elevate your book from being just another title on the shelf to a must-read phenomenon? The world of book marketing is both an art and a science. It's about finding that perfect blend of creativity and strategy to make your book shine. From understanding your target audience to leveraging the power of social media and strategic partnerships, effective marketing can make all the difference. It's not just about selling a book, it's about creating an experience, a brand, and a loyal readership. Well, today's guest knows all too well the intricacies of this process. MJ Rose is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling historical fiction novelist. MJ is also the founder of AuthorBuzz, the first ad agency for authors and books, and co-founder of 1001 Dark Nights and Blue Box Press. These publishing ventures are renowned for their strategic elevated marketing, spending more to market their authors than the big five publishers often do. MJ's unique approach to marketing and her rich history in the publishing world make her a wealth of insights. So whether you're an aspiring author or a seasoned writer looking to boost your book's visibility, today's conversation promises to be both enlightening and inspiring. So let's delve into the sometimes intimidating but not impossible world of book marketing and discover how to make your creative works stand out. So MJ, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, marketing is probably the number one struggle for self-published authors. And so I'm so excited to kind of just tread into these waters with you. But before we get into the thick of it, tell us about yourself and maybe the moment you knew that you wanted to be a writer.
I actually don't ever remember not wanting to be a writer. I was one of those little kids that was happier in museums and libraries than I was in playgrounds. And I was writing short stories and poems when I was a little girl. So it's just, I actually wanted to be an artist. And I went to art school and majored in printmaking and painting, but wound up going into advertising because you can't make a living painting or printmaking. And once I got into advertising as an art director, I wound up moving over to the writing side because I was better at writing than I was at art. And that led to doing a lot of commercials, which led to writing a lot of 30-second scripts, which led to writing screenplays, which led to getting screenplays stolen, which led to everybody saying, if you want to do screenplays, you got to move to LA. And if you're going to stay in New York, you should write novels. So that's when I started a little late in my 30s writing novels because I wasn't ready to move to LA, nor did I ever get ready to move to LA.
That's fair. Honestly, I can't imagine. I live in Alabama. I've always lived in Alabama. I can't imagine leaving that. That's my happy place. It's my inspiration. So yeah, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to leave home either. Especially if that's where you found your inspiration. And it sounds like you've always been a storyteller. Like that's just always been, even in advertising, you have to be able to tell stories.
Yes, you do. Yes. In 30 seconds, but you have to be able to tell them.
Yeah, I bet you are the master of blurb writing. You can just nail that story.
I can write. I can do blurbs. Yeah, except for myself. I can do them for everybody else.
Why is that the thing? Why is that so hard?
I know the whole story. You know,
Yes.
when I do it for somebody else, I just read like a 2-page synopsis. But when I do it for myself, I know all the intricacies of the book, and I'm in love usually with the part of the book that isn't necessarily the selling part of the book.
Yes.
So it depends on the book. Sometimes it's really fast. Most of the time it's really slow.
Oh, I am the same exact way. I get so hung up because I'm like, I need to tell you everything that's happened in the book. And it's like, that's not what this part is for, Jennifer.
Right.
Back off.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Was there a pivotal moment that just made you go, I'm done in advertising? Like, what was that big aha moment that said, this is it. I'm not doing anything else but writing novels?
No, that didn't, there wasn't a moment like that. I just stayed in it for a long time, and then
Mm.
I didn't really leave. I just left a full-time job to do freelance and write more. And then once I started writing novels, once I got my first novel sold, I was very nervous about relying on fiction. I knew, even then, knew too much about how the marketplace worked that I started doing advertising for authors pretty much right away. So I never stopped. I mean, I'm still writing novels and still doing advertising. I just do it for different products. I don't do it for bras and beer anymore. I do it just for books.
I love that. Did you have any like major influences on your writing? Because you write historical fiction mostly, right? Is that correct?
I do now. In the beginning, I think the first 4 or 5 books were commercial, not commercial, contemporary fiction. But the whole world of computers and cell phones made it, took away a lot of the magic for me of plots, because you could never miss a train. You could, except the battery dies, but everybody had their battery dying. So I had a friend who was writing historical fiction and talking always about the research he was doing. And I got really jealous about the research. And I decided in 2006, I think, that I wanted to try historical fiction. And I still write novellas with Steve Berry that are contemporary, based on his female character, Cassiopeia Witt. But, and those are shorter. But other than those, I'm strictly historical fiction.
Okay. I love research for any kind of
Yeah.
book that I'm writing. That's my favorite part. And I can imagine that historical research is probably very enlightening. Has there ever been anything that made you go, I can't believe I just learned this?
Pretty much everything. But if I had to pick one thing, it's that in the 1500s, they used the sap that came out, and actually in ancient Egypt too, they used the sap that came out of a mummy as part of a perfume formula.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's probably the weirdest thing that I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that
Yeah.
I've read about, but that's one of the weirder things. The second weirdest thing is that Thomas Alva Edison and Henry Ford both believed in reincarnation. That's not that weird, but that they believed that your soul left your body in your dying breath, and they both had their dying breaths collected in test tubes and sealed, thinking that their soul might be in there. That was pretty wild.
That is wild. I mean, to stumble across those little things, that would just
Yeah.
to me, that would make my book. Like that would be
Yeah.
like that's going
There's
in
a
there
whole
somehow.
book called The Collector of Dying Breaths, based on when I read that, not about either of those two, but based on the fact that I heard that, and I was just fascinated by it.
Yes, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love that. That book is going on my TBR
Yeah,
like right
yeah.
now. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about how art plays a role in your novels, because that was something I was very intrigued with, and also something I've dabbled with, but I'm not an artist per se in the strictly like visual arts type way. But I write lyrics for my characters because they're
Oh,
country
that's
music
great.
artists, right? So it's art that I'm trying to incorporate in my books. But how do you incorporate them? Because that's a whole new element to add to your
Well,
stories.
it's more that I seem to be drawn to characters who are in the arts. There have been musicians, and my definition of the arts is a little bit wider than a lot of people. I think perfume is an art, and I think jewelry is an art.
Mhm.
So I usually have people who are writers, painters, perfumers, jewelry makers. There's just people that's who I want to write about. I don't have a problem with people who do other things, but if I'm going to spend a year with people, I want them to be doing something that I find really interesting. So most of my characters, the main character, not all the characters, but usually the main character is in the arts in some way.
I love that, because I agree. Arts is like, if you create something, you're an artist,
Yeah.
whether it is perfume or a painting. Like, I agree
Yeah.
completely. And even engineers can be artists, they come up with these solutions and ideas sometimes. And so you can kind of make that an artsy type thing as well. So
Yeah.
I like that as well.
Yeah. So I think also psychiatrists, I think that they're pretty art. I think that the way they make connections is very similar to how artists create things. So I've written a lot about psychiatrists and psychologists.
Oh, well, we're flattered that you would write about us. That is my background as well, and so I love that you make that connection, because
Yeah.
we solve problems, we provide solutions, and therefore I think we're creative.
Yeah.
So, okay, so did I understand that you incorporate art with your books? Like when you're selling them, there's art involved. Did I understand that correctly?
No, I think it was just a jeweler who's also an
Oh,
artist
okay.
created the cover, did some artwork for the cover of my current book.
Gotcha.
Because he's a jeweler. His name is Michael Robinson. The name of the jewelry firm is David Michael. They're internationally renowned. And when I told him he loves lover's eyes, and he does them as jewelry, and he also sketches them first. When I told him about the book, he offered to do it. Sorry, I have the remnants of
Bless
an
your heart.
allergy.
Yeah.
He had he offered to do a sketch for the cover of the book, and he did a drawing of two lovers' eyes for the book.
I love that. I love collaborating with people who know something about what I'm working on. Like when I say I've written lyrics for my characters, I have a musician who is now putting music to some of those lyrics.
Oh, that's
and
great.
I'm so excited
That's
about
great.
it, because when the book comes out in October, I hope to have the song ready to release as well. And I'm just like, I'm not singing it. I
Oh,
just
that's
provided
great.
lyrics. But
That's
yeah, you
great.
know, I love collaborating like that.
Yeah.
So you have a very interesting journey into getting your first books published. So can you tell us a little bit about that when you wrote your first novel?
Sure. I got an agent. I had 3 novels written, and none of them fit in a particular genre. They all were a little too much of mystery to be literary fiction. They were too commercial to be literary fiction, but they weren't commercial enough to be commercial fiction. And the early ones were also very erotic, and they were too erotic to not be erotic. But erotic wasn't a genre then, and it made everybody nervous. So I was in advertising, as we've discussed. And so this is 1999, I decided to make a PDF of the book. There were no really ebooks. Doing research and starting in 96. So I told my agent that I was going to not publish the book, but I was going to do a marketing experiment with the book. And I was going to have a PDF of the book, which I could print out for people at Kinko's, or I could mail it to them. And I would run the advertising on some sites that I thought made sense. And I'd hopefully I'd be able to prove to the publishers that this genre, what I'd written, made sense. I wasn't trying to self-publish. At that point, self-publishing was called vanity publishing, and it was a big no-no. So I did this thing. She actually fired me. My agent fired me because she said it was self-publishing and she wouldn't be a party to it. And I said, no, it's a marketing experiment. Anyway, she fired me, and I did it. And the book took off through the marketing that I was doing to see if the tagline, which was, "Can an erotic novel be intelligent?" which was the way I was marketing the book, it took off and people discovered it. It was a lot easier back then in 1999 to have people discover things online. And I sold a lot of copies, and at halfway through, I got an email from the Doubleday Book Club and Literary Guild saying that they had bought the book, they'd heard about it and bought the book, and they wanted to buy it for the book clubs. And I wrote them, I didn't think it was real, I thought it was a joke, but I asked them for their phone number, and I called, and it was real. And I said, and I sold them the books, and I asked them if they had ever bought a self-published book before. They didn't actually know it was self-published. They didn't care. And they never had. And so I went back to the agent and I said, listen, the marketing worked. Do you want to sell this book now? And she was like, absolutely. And so all the publishers that had said no to it then wanted it. And I went with Simon & Schuster with, at the time it was called Pocket Books. It then turned into Atria. And I went there and they published the book. So it was about a year. The whole thing was about a year. It doesn't happen like that anymore, but it was the beginning of a lot of things, you know. That was just the very beginning of ebooks and the whole phenomena. So everything was brand new.
I love that on the one hand, how exciting, and on the other hand, how terrifying, because you just had to jump out there on that leap of faith and be like, all right, this is either going to work or it's not.
Well, it wasn't terrifying because it already hadn't worked. I mean, I already
Yeah.
hadn't been able to sell the books to publishers because I crossed too many genres. So I really had nothing to lose. It was like maybe a couple $1,000 building the website and having a cover designed. And that was all. And I didn't think I did hope that I'd sell enough copies to prove to the publisher that they could buy it. I didn't think it would be a phenomena. I didn't think it would be the first self-published book to be picked up by a New York house. I didn't think it was going to sell 3,000 copies. I thought I was going to sell like 50 copies and be able to give her the information. So instead, I wound up on the Today Show and New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and a lot of very exciting places. And it was really fun for a minute and a half. And then I was old news and we moved on.
And then you had to write your next book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Okay, so given your experience, kind of dabbling in both traditional and self-publishing, like, are there advantages or disadvantages that you can see to each
Well, it's a
path?
totally different world now than it was then. So I stayed with traditional publishing for years,
Mhm.
for 22 books and 21, 22 years. And then my publisher left the house and went to another house, and the publisher above her died, sadly, Carolyn Reedy. And the house changed so much that I didn't want to stay anymore.
Mhm.
There were a lot of reasons. They weren't doing enough marketing for the books anymore, and all the people that were my champions had left. And by then I had started 1001 Dark Nights and Blue Box Press, and realized, wait a minute, this is kind of crazy. I have a publishing company. I don't have to stay with the publisher anymore. And it was weird because it was going back to what I'd originally done, but 2 decades later, with the marketplace completely 100% changed, and actually much easier to self-publish a book in 2022, 21 than it had ever been before. So that's when I did it. But I don't think that much of, there's so many different people doing it so many different ways. There are so many different reasons to do it that I don't really think I could do a general comment about what's better about one or the other. I would say that there's a financial issue to getting published by a traditional publisher if you're getting a 6-figure or more advance. Now, if you're getting like $15,000 or $20,000, with what it really, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, later, but I don't think people should do their own marketing.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, so I think that if you're going to self-publish a book, you really have to invest in it in a lot of ways. I think you have to invest in a really good cover. There are 3 million books out a year now.
Right.
It's very hard to get noticed. So I think that if you're going to do this, depending on the genre that you write in, it's going to cost you money. And so I think you have to weigh what you would get from a traditional deal. And even with a traditional deal, most people have to add to what the publisher's doing, because the publisher's only marketing a lot of the very big books. So it's a game of, if the publisher gives me this much, how much am I going to spend? I don't think anybody should quit their day job until they have enough money in the bank that if their publishing career doesn't work, they're not going to starve, because we all know, and it's all cyclical. I know so many authors who were making 6 figures 3 years ago that are no longer making 6 figures because the genre that they're writing in has really dried up. I mean, I'm not saying this about all historical fiction, but historical fiction has taken a huge hit as romantasy and rom-coms have, since COVID, taken off like crazy, because people taste changed and people didn't want to be depressed anymore and they wanted to read happy stuff or real fantasy stuff. Thrillers have also been hurt in the last 2-3 years. And I would say that suspense, thrillers, and mystery thrillers, and some women's fiction has all gone down like 30 to 40%. That means their authors' advances have gone down also.
Mm.
So there are all these factors that should make you decide. If you're going to get $100,000 advance, it's pretty hard to turn that down and self-publish. Except that if you're a romance writer and you already know that you're hybrid and you're already self-publishing half your titles and you're making $200,000 a book, then you can look at the 100 and you can say, I don't need them, because after the initial advance, when you publish a book yourself, you're getting 100% of the royalties. When you publish with the traditional house, you're getting from 10 to 15% up to 25% of the royalties on ebooks. So it really, there's so many factors. So there's no general.
Yeah, but I think that's great advice too, though. You do have there's pros and cons to every situation in life.
Yeah.
You just have to weigh them out and
Yeah.
know what works best for you, and know your personality and know your work. And
Yeah.
I think that the decision becomes a lot easier at that point. And you have publishing companies, and they are known for what is called strategic elevated marketing. And I thought this sounds really amazing. Can you explain what that entails and kind of how that benefits the authors you work with?
The concept between 1001 Dark Nights, this isn't something authors can do themselves, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but the concept between 1001 Dark Nights was elevated strategic marketing, the goal of which was we would take a novel that you wrote and we would publish that for you, and through the marketing we were doing, we would be growing your overall brand 5 to 10% a year by exposing the novella to all these fans of romance that haven't necessarily read you before, or maybe haven't read that series before. So we invest 5 figures into every novella that we publish, and we started publishing novels a few years ago from some of those authors who were like, well, I want to do some hybrid, or I want to do something with my publisher, but I like your marketing and I want to do at least one series with you. And so we do that. We're not open to submissions. It's actually by invitation only to our own authors or people that we know. We're a very small company, so we're very limited to how many books we can publish a year.
Oh, sure. And if I'm not mistaken, and this may be somebody else using a similar name, but you do a lot of like collaborative. What's the word I'm looking for? A bunch of authors in the same book. Like is that?
Oh, we've done some of those.
Yeah.
We did the world of like one author would start it, and then we do like, yes, we've done some of those. Yeah.
I think that's a really great idea, because I mean, you get invested in the story, and it doesn't matter who wrote it. You're invested in the story, and next thing you know, you're like, I need to know who wrote this.
Yeah. It's hard to do that. It's another thing that's hard to do unless you have a name.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that are hard to do these days unless you have a name. It's not even the way it was 6 years ago in terms of building. I mean, if you're gonna go into the self-publishing world, what I advise people now is to write at least 3 to 5 books before you publish the first one. And that's so that you can publish every 3 to 6 months, have something ready that's really top quality, because over 40% of readers, when they read a book that they love, will immediately look up the author to see what else they've written. And that the only way to really build these days is to spend a lot of money marketing the first book, knowing or hoping that the first book will do so well that enough people will read it that they'll want to know what else you've written. And then you'll have all these books for sale. And you keep advertising the first one. If they're a series, you keep advertising the first one. If they're not a series, you can move around to what you're advertising. But it's important to start off with a big bang. And it's very hard to do that if you publish a book this year and then one in 2 years. You're not going to get any name recognition, which is part of the problem with a lot of traditional publishing breaking anybody out now, is because with 3 million books coming out a year, it's just too hard to break somebody out if there's not a backlist.
Yes, that is something that writing in a series was never really something I set out to do. I thought I'm just going to write whatever pops into my head, and I would like to just, get lost in my story, and then I'll get to the next story. Well, it worked out that I fell in love with my character and their stories, and then I saw some background characters that I thought, I wonder what happened to them. And so then I wrote their story. And so I've got a 4-book series right now that's kind of in the lineup, February, October, May, and I can't remember, maybe November, something like that. Anyway, it's the 3 to 6 month spread out, and it was an accident. I didn't mean to do it, but that's what's happening.
You did the right thing.
it was intuition, though. Yes, it wasn't. I love when that happens, because that doesn't always happen. A lot of times I fall into these marketing pitfalls, which leads me to my next question. Like, what are some of those pitfalls that you see authors, self-published authors, falling into, and how do we avoid them?
Oh, sure. That's actually easy. So the biggest pitfall that I think everybody falls into is they read something that another author said and they believe it. They think that that's what they need to do. They think that's what's going to happen to them without taking a million things into consideration. First of all, is the author telling you the truth? There are a lot of authors out there who are wonderful people, but when it comes to talking about what they've done for their books, they don't want to share their information because they feel like they've come up with something. And a couple who I actually have run into who actually put out false information on purpose so that people will do the wrong thing so that they'll soar. There was one person doing that a ton a couple of years ago who was really screwing around with pre-orders and really hurting a lot of authors. But anyway, so that paying for people online who I can teach you how to sell 25,000 books in 2 months. First of all, just because one person could sell 25,000 books in 2 months doesn't mean that you can. Every book is different. Every cover is different. Every author is different. Every story is different. A book that's not terrific isn't going to sell no matter what you do. My boss in advertising always said, nothing kills a bad product faster than great advertising. And he was talking about a beer, but it works for books too, that what you want to do is you want to get enough people reading your book through marketing that they will talk about it and the book will sell through word of mouth. No advertising campaign on its own is going to sell enough books to make something a success. You need word of mouth. I mean, that's what every major IT book, that's what the Colleen Hoovers, the Rebecca Yarros, every IT book, there's no magic to the marketing that was done. I mean, we have Jennifer Armentrout, we publish her. There was no magic. I did the same marketing for Jennifer that we did for every other book we've ever done. And the magic was in the book. Magic is in the book. And the readers started to read the book because they saw it advertised, and they loved it, and they started telling everybody else about it. In this case, in a lot of these cases, they go onto TikTok. Real readers go onto TikTok and do real testimonials about how they feel about the book, and those become viral. You can't create those. You can't buy advertising like that. You can't pay those people. When you pay influencers, and there's nothing wrong with doing some kind of payment of influencers, but that doesn't turn into an IT book situation. You need a legitimate groundswell of readers who love the book in order to really have something turn out to be a mega success. But I think what happens is, and I don't blame anybody, authors all want to be successful. I do. And so we hear so-and-so did such and such, and we think, I'll do that and I'll be successful too. And we don't want to believe that the book has to be amazing. And I have so many clients at AuthorBuzz who tell me, I have a form that you fill out, and one is like, what's your goal? One of the questions is, what's your goal? And it's like to be a bestseller. And then I ask them what they're doing in terms of marketing. And we then, talk about it. And I say, well, the book has to sell. And they say, oh, but the book is fabulous. I know it's fabulous. I have 10 friends that all loved it, or my family loves it, or I hired an editor who loves it. And yes, that's all true. All the people who know you or who you pay are going to love the book. And it can even be, I talk about this a lot, it can even be a really good book, but it needs some ephemeral something that turns it into a magical book. And I say this as an author who loves her own books and gets great reviews. I've never had a book that had that ephemeral something that turned it into a mega bestseller. And at the same time, that's a weird goal anyway, because you don't know that's going to happen. Nobody ever plans on it. And you can have a very successful career without being a mega bestseller. But the other thing about that is, like, I've read and marketed incredible books. Like, there's a book called The Bells that nobody's ever heard of. It's one of the best books I've read in my whole life. And we did a huge marketing campaign for it. And we didn't sell any copies. Not any. We didn't sell enough copies to turn it into a hit. I thought it was going to be as big as Perfume, which is a book by Patrick Susskind that was a big hit when I was like in high school. But I thought this was another one of those books, and it didn't take off. And why? It was brilliant, but it didn't have whatever it had. And E.L. James, that book had some ephemeral something that made everybody want to read it. Anybody will say it's not a great book. They're not incredibly well written books. There's no shock I mean, there's a lot of sex in the books, but there was nothing about those books that was that different or more special than anything else. But something was, some ephemeral something spoke to the readers that made them all want to talk about it. You can't plan for those things. So I think that the biggest harm that authors do to themselves is they believe their own. I always say this: you have to be an optimist to write a book. You have to believe that you have something very special to say and a very special story to tell that's worth you spending 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And then you have to be a pessimist as soon as the book is finished when it goes to publishing it. And you have to realize that the chances of any one book being successful are really minute. 3 million books are sold. Less than 5% of them sell more than 2,000 copies a year. And the average book sells 100 copies a year. So even the average book published by a traditional house sells less than 1,000 copies a year. So people need to be realistic, but at the same time optimistic. And it's a very hard balance. And I know so many writers that can't balance it. Like you need to be optimistic to write, but the business wears you down because it's really, really hard to sell books.
It really is. And I have found that too, that I'm going into October will be my fourth book that I've released. And when I started out, I was like, I don't know, it's a good story. I didn't believe in my work as much as, say my husband or my editor or anything like that. But it had a lot to do with the fact that I did see a lot of people rising to that instant success. And because that was about the time that Book Talk really started taking off. And I thought, and that changed everything. And I was like, I don't know, I can't do that because I compared myself so badly to so many people. I thought, this is not going to go anywhere.
Somebody great said comparison is the work of the devil, or comparison brings nothing but heartache. There's one other thing you asked, what big mistake I see, and I didn't say what the other enormous mistake I see is, but I like to preface this by saying if somebody came out with a book called How to Pull Your Own Teeth, would you pull your own teeth? No, you would go to a dentist. And that is the same for everything in the DIY world. Your book cover, the editing, the advertising, the marketing, the PR. I know it's expensive and difficult to raise money, but do-it-yourself marketing is do-it-yourself marketing. Now, I just like giving this one example, which is you can do your own Facebook ads, right? And you can use the interface. And then the question is, how many target authors should you choose? How big should your audience be for every $100 you spend? How much money should you spend a day? How long should the campaign run? This is even true for a Goodreads giveaway. When you do a Goodreads giveaway, do you want to do it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Do you want to do 100 Kindle books or do you want to do 4 paperback books? And there are answers. There are answers I know that I'm not going to share because I have account executives at these companies that I go over best practices with, and they tell me what works better and what doesn't. So I know how much money you have to spend at Facebook and how many people you should be targeting for that amount of money. But nobody's going to tell you that. The people that really know it, like people like me, aren't going to share it because that's how we make a living. You can't guess at it. It's counterintuitive. And there are people that fall into it. And there's certain genres that are easier than others. Romance is much easier than other genres. And here's another hard, cold, I call myself the voice of doom, but this is a hard, cold fact that authors really need to realize and think about. The average romance reader reads between 50 and 100 books a year. And 50% of them are willing to try an author that they've never heard of, as long as the price is right. And the reason for that is they're reading 50 to 100 books a year. They can afford to read a couple that aren't very good. The average thriller, mystery, suspense reader is reading 14 books a year only. And traditional publishers are publishing way more than 50 major bestsellers in each of those categories. And they're putting them up on BookBubs or KUs for $1.99. So your average thriller reader and the average reader has over 400 books on their ebook reader that are unread. For them to try an author that they've never heard of, when they can get David Baldacci's book that was 3 years ago for $1.99, when they're only reading 14 books a year, you need to start weighing things and realizing things that are going to make things difficult. You need to pay attention to your pricing. You need to figure out, should you be, there's all this other stuff.
Yes.
And then the book club reader is reading 35 to 50 books a year, which is great. And she's much more willing to spend a little more money for the book. But A, how do you reach her? And B, she's about 25, she's about 50% willing also to try somebody she never heard of, as long as the book looks right. She's not going to try, I'm not going to go through it, but the book has to be the quality, the cover of these books have to be the quality of the same book that Random House is publishing and putting on sale for $1.99. And that's expensive, and covers are expensive.
You are exactly right about that. I love that. I love all of this that you are like just sharing with us. How can we work with you? What are the genres that you work with? What is the best way to get started when it comes to, working with someone who could market our books better?
Oh, well, the company's called Author Buzz Co. And it's on authorbuzz.com. And my email is authorbuzzco@gmail.com. And I work with all genres, but the book has to look professionally done. I have a lot of questions that I ask. I often will say either I don't think you're ready, or I don't want to take your money because I don't think that this is going to work. But there's not like any caveats that I could give you that would be like, I wouldn't take the book on. But I don't want to take somebody's money. Unlike most people, I'll say to when somebody asks me how many books am I going to sell, I will say nobody has any idea. You could sell 5, you could sell 100, you could sell none. It all depends, because no marketing and no PR sells a book.
Yeah.
All that we can do, whether we're marketing or PR, and we can talk about PR for a minute, but all any of us can do for you is get your book in front of the right readers and then send them to Amazon or whatever bookstore it is. Once they get to the bookstore, they're going to look at the book, they're going to read the description, they're going to read the excerpt, and they're going to read the reader reviews. You can't put any of that in an ad or in a PR effort. An influencer isn't going to have all that. So that's when the sale is made. When the reader reads the excerpt is when the sale is made. When they read the reader reviews and 10 of the reviews talk about how the characters aren't believable, you're going to lose whoever I brought you to Amazon to hopefully sell your book to. You're going to lose who I brought you. Nobody wants to believe this. Everybody is so convinced that really good marketing and really good PR is going to sell the book. And it's not. It's just going to send a lot of people to the place where they might buy it. And so I tell people that they don't want to hear it. And it's like, fine, I'm not taking your money if you don't want to believe it, because you think because there are people out there who are like, I promise if you give me $25,000, I will sell 25,000 books. Well, maybe if you make the book $1, that person, will find a team of people to buy the book. I mean, there are scams out there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Just be careful. What I tell people is, if it sounds too good to be true, it's too good to be true. It's very hard to sell books, and you have to have a really thick skin.
Oh, 100%. I did a TikTok yesterday about an email that I had gotten that they came out of the woodworks. Just all of a sudden, they came out and said, we have found your book and we would love to represent your book. And I was like, red flag immediately. Nobody's going to come ask you for your book.
No,
that is not how that works, especially if you're self-published.
I don't even advertise my marketing service. I don't advertise it to anybody. I mean, people have to find us. We get recommended by a lot of people, but I don't advertise. And I would never write somebody out of the blue and say, I saw your book and I think that I can market it. I would never do that.
Right. No, I agree. So you mentioned PR. Are we talking PR for the book, PR for the author, or both?
Well, unless you're really famous, I don't think that there's PR for the author that you can get. And pretty much the same is true for the book. So it used to be that there were like 200 media outlets that could review a book, and now there are like 10. But PR is it's really important. It's another one of those places where it's really easy to get screwed, because with marketing, 80% of every dollar you give me, goes out the door for me to buy the space to run the ads. I don't own any of the places where I run the ads. So if you give me $100, $80 buys you space. Not that I sell anything for $100, but just as an example. With PR, 100% of the money that you give the PR person goes to their effort. So they can take the money and make the effort, and you can get nothing. With me, I mean, you can get no placements. With me, if I take your money, at least the ad will show up at the number of times that I told you it was going to show up. However, so you have to be careful who you're working with in any field, that the person has credentials, but especially in PR, because you have to know that the person is trustworthy. Like, I only recommend, there are only 2 PR people that I even will recommend, because I know that they just never lie to anybody. But with PR, what works now with PR is getting bookstagrammers, influencers. There's still radio, there are podcasts. There are very few review places, but there are a couple. So PR, I always say that you should be spending the bulk of your money in marketing because it's guaranteed, whereas PR is always a gamble. But not everybody has enough money to spend enough money. But it depends on the book. There are some books, like a cozy mystery, no matter how well it's written, it's going to be really, when it's the 5th in a series, it's going to be incredibly hard to get any PR for that book. If you are a media sensation because you ran for Congress on the Everybody Should Be Naked ticket, and you've gotten a million newspaper articles about yourself as a congresswoman, and then you write a book, it's going to be really easy to get you attention. So you have to find a PR person and a marketing person who are honest with you, who will say, listen, I can't get you any, you're not going to get any reviews. Like, and the people I recommend say this, I'm not going to get you any reviews. I can get you X, Y, and Z. So PR is, you're paying for the effort, and marketing, you're paying for the actual placement. But just be careful in both cases. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true.
Every single time. I know it's so hard. We all want that fast track to the top. We do. I mean, even if we want to be humble about it and say, no, I'll just go. No, you want it. You want that #1 bestseller spot. Yeah, don't, but there's not a fast track. It's not that simple. So yes, look for the red flags.
And also, it's important to remember that the getting to be #2 on the bestseller list doesn't mean that you're going to stay there, and it doesn't mean the next book's going to get on the list, and it doesn't mean anybody's going to care. Yeah. Readers actually do not care whether the book is a bestseller. Readers care that other readers are telling them that they love the book. Yes. So it's great to get on an Amazon top 100 subcategory list because people browse those. That's how a lot of people find books, by reading those lists to see, okay, I love medical thrillers. I don't, but I love medical thrillers. So I'll go to the medical thriller subcategory list and look at the top 100 books when I'm looking for a new book. So, like, there are things that you know and things. So if to do marketing, one of the things we're always trying to do is we're always trying to get a book on those top 100 subcategory lists, because we know that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we can get the book on that list, all these people who don't see ads are going to see the book on the list there. But it's not because it's a bestseller that they want it. It's because they're seeing the book in a subcategory. People are very loyal to their subcategories. Like, I'm always looking for books about art and books about France and English countryside and cooking. I mean, those are like novels that I really love, or bookstores, you know. So if I go to those subcategories and I browse them, because I don't know how else to find all the books. So that's an important thing that you want to play around with. And there are ways to get on those lists by lowering the price during the time you're doing the ad. No, you're not going to make the ad money back. But hopefully, as soon as the book goes back onto regular price, it's still going to be on a top 100 list, and you'll be selling for the next 2 weeks at a normal price. So that's why publishers do those $1.99 sales. They're not making any money, but they're getting new readers exposed to the book who then can also buy the backlist.
No, that's great advice, and that is so true. Because I am one of those that I will see the bestseller doesn't mean anything to me. I think it's great. As an author, I would love to have that, just that accolade to say, look what I can do, because that would give me a boost. But I know for a fact that I'm like you. I don't go looking for the number one bestseller, because it doesn't guarantee it's a good book.
No. And also sometimes for me, so everybody's talking about it, makes me not want to read it. I'm actually one of those people. But if it's a rom-com which is a genre that I love, and it has to do with a bookstore, I don't care, as long as I'll read the sample, I'll read the excerpt before I'll buy it, unless it's, a Kindle Unlimited, and then I'll just download it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What are your thoughts on Kindle Unlimited? Do you think that's a good place or a bad place for self-published authors?
There are readers you're not going to reach any other way except through KU. And you can only have to stay in KU for 90 days. So right. I always tell people that no matter what you're doing, you should switch in and out, because there are readers you're not going to get any other way. But those readers could fall in love with you, and they could be an influencer, or they could fall in love with you and go buy your backlist if it's priced right. So I don't think that there's any reason to avoid it. Even major publishers are now putting their major bestsellers into KU for 90 days at a certain point in a book's trajectory, because they don't want to miss the KU reader who's never going to go anywhere else.
I agree. I fell in love with KU the first time. I don't like. I
That's the love.
Oh my gosh! Like you were like, they read about 100 books a year, and I'm like, or 432. It just depends,
I go through a week where I read three KU books a week.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I can't stop it. If you have a series, you better bet I'm going to download the next one immediately if I like
absolutely.
it. So. Yes. Right. No, I think, and some people just see Amazon as an enemy. I'm like, use them. Like, use your enemy to your benefit.
Yeah, that's less people than used to. I mean, booksellers still do, but that we're not going to get into the whole bookseller versus Amazon argument, because we can't solve that at all.
No, absolutely not. I have some other self-published author friends. They're like, no, they're too big, and I'm like, that's where I find all my readers. Like,
be my guest. Find the readers without Amazon.
Good luck. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Not only that, but there's a really important factor, which is that people want to buy things through a trusted retailer. Like, the more I buy at Amazon, the more points I get on my Amex card that's linked to Amazon. So I don't want to go to another place to buy my books or to buy anything else, because I want to make those points. So you can have as much attitude as you want, but understand as a consumer, you might lose your reader, and there's no way to get them if you're not where they want to shop. It's fine. I mean, I'm all for principles, but just understand what you're doing when you're making decisions like that.
1000%. Yes, I'm on the same page with you. Okay, are there any upcoming projects or books that you're particularly excited about that you are putting out there into the universe?
Well, yes, I have a book out that's only been out for a couple of months called Forgetting to Remember, which is a time travel romantic suspense novel, lots of genres in there. That is one of my two favorite books I've ever written. And I really, really love it. And it's only $8.99 on Amazon. And if you like time travel at all, people are really loving it. It's got tons of 5-star reviews, and I hope people read it and talk about it.
Yeah, for serious. So that is, I am so with you on, it's about the word of mouth. Like, that is where, if you can find some loyal readers and they will talk about your book, yes, that is where you're going to have to find it. And finding podcasts like this where you can say, hey, I have a book and it's really great, go read it. I think that, those are fantastic ways to actually get your book out there for people to talk about as well. Okay, so you had mentioned the AuthorBuzz website and your email address. Do you have any social medias where people can connect with you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram. I don't do a lot on social media. I'm on it, but I don't do a lot anymore. Just out of exhaustion. I have a author page at Facebook where I list new books that I have coming out, or books by other people that I think might be of interest. So yeah, it's all on mjrose.com. It's linked to all my social media, but I'm not like, you can always ask me questions. You can always email me through either place.
Okay, fantastic. I just want people to be able to find you and to learn from you. Obviously, you have a wealth of information, as I said earlier, to share with us. And I wish we had more time because I would sit here and I know you're probably not feeling great anyway, but I would pick your
No,
brain
I feel fine.
all morning.
It's just an allergy. It's just a cough.
Okay.
So much pollen. There's been so much rain and pollen that it's just a little allergy. That's all. I feel fine.
We wake up that morning. Every morning we're like that. Our heads are stuffy, and it's like, good morning. Yeah, I feel that
But I
deeply.
have a little more time if you have one or two more questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so speaking of social media, where do you see that in the world of marketing for self-published authors? Because
Oh,
I've seen it done well and I've seen it done
oh
badly.
God, this is such a,
Yeah.
yeah. I think we'll have time for one more question since
Okay.
this is the question. It's such a huge question.
It is.
So there's something called social media suicide. The, so this is what happens. I don't know why this is so difficult for people to realize. You can have a gigantic social media presence of people who know you, who don't read at all. Like, I have 450,000 people on my Facebook page, which I built up over years. When I come out with a new book, I probably sell 500 books to those people. Why? One reason is because they all are waiting for it to go on sale because everybody knows everything goes on sale. Another reason is a lot of them don't read. A lot of them found me because I post about things that are interesting to them, which is great. I post a lot about magic and mystery and history, and they're interested in the posts, but just because they're interested in the post doesn't mean they want to buy or read a novel. That's one thing. Another problem is the author who has no presence, who has a book who comes out, who either spends ridiculous amounts of money hiring somebody to build a social media presence, which is useless, because anybody who comes to you because you paid them isn't going to buy the book. But also, so you build, let's say you do it the right way. And the right way is to figure out what your books stand for. There's this great TED talk by Simon Sinek called The Reptile Brain, and it's how I built my presence. It's you figure out what you stand for. It's called I Believe In, and it's an hour, and it's worth watching. It's not about books. It's about Apple versus Dell computers, but you'll get it. And after I watched it, my husband had found it. I didn't have a lot of Facebook followers. After I found it, I wrote my I Believe. And my I Believe was, I believe that mystery and magic are all around us. And I put it in my books because I hope that if I exaggerate it a little bit, people will realize that they see it all around, and they'll focus on it. It'll make them a little happier, make them see more beautiful things in the world. So I only posted things on my Facebook page that had to do with that I believe. And over the course of 4 or 5 years, I built up the page. I felt like in marketing, I had to prove what I was doing. So if I then went on that page, there was all these people, and every other post was about me and my books, all those people would stop reading me because they're not there. Nobody's there to be told about your book 72 times. If I tell you about my book twice, like I say, for every single time you post about you, you have to post 10 times about not you. So I post about things that are magical, birds that are magical, fish that are magical, actual magic, stars that are magical, mysteries that in the universe, like why is this, and mystical things with rocks. And I mean, just anything. I searched for every week. I'd spend 4 hours finding 4 posts that I could post during the week. And then, yes, I tell them about my book, but you can't hit people over the head. I know authors, self-published and not, that have a book coming out and have a book out, that for 6 months, I would say they post 5 to 10 times a week about their own book and maybe once about something else. You're not going to get anybody to buy your book because you keep telling them to buy it. And they're not going to change their mind if you post 50 reviews instead of 5. And they're not there because they're looking for another book. They're there. So you have to be really careful. Yes, you want to build up social media to a point that your fan base can find you so that when you have a new book out, you can tell them about it. And that's very important. Whether you do it, don't do it on Twitter because Twitter goes by too fast. People don't, it's not a good place for authors to make a dent. But have a Facebook page, have an Instagram account, if you're a TikTok kind of person, definitely do that. But not everybody has the presence to do that. If you want to see somebody who does it really well on TikTok, look up Tessa Bailey.
Yes.
She's great at it.
She's fantastic.
She's great at it. But you just have to, it takes a lot of time, and you have to really remember that it's not a marketing solution. It's especially for a new author, it's a way for people to connect to you after they've read the book. That's who is on your page. Mostly it's people who've read you, then go find you, and then, sorry, bug.
Did you get it?
Yeah. People who read you, then they go find you, then they follow your page. So you want to keep them on the page by telling them interesting things, not about your book. And then you also, when you have the next book come out, that's a great way to tell them, hey, I have a new book out. But just think about it logically. Strangers are not going to come to your page because you have, unless they've read you. You know, something has to bring them there. So anyway, I could talk about this particular thing for hours because so many people have done it right and so many people have done it wrong. And you really have to look how other people do it. Like Adriana Triagini did such a smart thing. And I know her and she's wonderful. And I don't think she did this on purpose, but she wound up, she has a Facebook page. She writes a book a year. But what she does is she interviews other authors. And she gets a ton of traffic because of the other authors that she interviews. And she does great interviews and she reads the books. And she's this warm, wonderful, funny person. And they come to her and readers flock to her for these interviews. And then they fall in love with her. And then they buy her book because they've fallen in love with how she's treated all these other people. She doesn't talk about her book enough to make you crazy. When she has a book out, she tells you about it. When there's a special, she tells you about it. But she's a good person to follow on social media to see a really interesting way of how somebody really used their presence to not only help other writers, but how it really works for her.
I think that's a great idea. Building a community of like-minded authors and readers like that's never really going to hurt you, assuming that, you know, you find you're working with people that you can trust and building that community up around you, as opposed to the ones who would undermine you. Look for those red flags because there are people out there.
Authors aren't necessarily the community that you want to build.
Sure.
You want to build the community of readers of authors that are similar to you in terms of writing. Because you just don't want to, it's hard for it to ask an author to market you, you know, to do you a favor unless you know the author really well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I'm just thinking along the lines of, because I do have other author friends that we share work. We share, you know, you've got to have people in your corner that believe.
Yes, yeah. I just meant not some random group of authors you're going to ask to do stuff for you.
That gets awkward. I don't have time to do stuff for other authors, you know, that I don't just love. So like we have to be real friends. Okay, MJ, I do have one final question, but it's the big question to like kind of wrap things up. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you want someone to walk away with if they hear nothing else that was said today?
Okay. Nobody can buy your book if they've never heard of it.
Ooh. That's valid. That is so true. Like, what else is there?
And the second part of it is a book is new to anybody who's never heard of it before. And there are publishers, like all you have to do is look at BookBub to see how old the books are that publishers are marketing. Unless the book is the only diet you need in 1984, their fiction is evergreen. You know, I get clients, I do a lot of marketing with publishers as well. And publishers are forever marketing books that are 2, 4, 6 years old. New only matters to booksellers who need to know what to put in the front. And new matters to readers who are huge fans of a series, like Nora Roberts. We did a survey of 150,000 readers and asked them if what they were reading was new. And 99-point-something% said yes, which we didn't believe. So we dug deeper, and less than 3% of them were actually reading a new book, meaning a book that was out in the last 6 months. But it was new to those readers, and the only people that actually looked at the copyright dates when we dug deeper were people who followed series or followed an author like Nora Roberts, who writes 5 books a year, the only reason they looked at the pub date is you can't remember the titles when someone's written 250 books. So you look at the copyright date to see, oh, this one's from 2019. I already read it because I buy everything she reads. So a book, nobody can buy a book they've never heard of, and a book is new to everybody who's never heard of it. So that's what I will leave you with.
I think that is fantastic and something that I don't think we think about often enough. So MJ, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom today.
You're welcome. It was so nice meeting you.
You too.